you don't know what your external attack risk is when you're just using your traditional vulnerability scanners.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Standout Before RSA episode. Again, this is our second year hosting this series, and the goal is simple, to spotlight cybersecurity companies and leaders who are bringing clarity, practicality, and real differentiation to a crowded market, especially as we head into the RSA event this month. One of the things I've noticed about cybersecurity these days is everyone's talking about AI. Everyone's promising automation, claiming better protection. Very few are taking steps back and asking a more foundational question. Do we actually have a complete view of our attack surface? So today I'm joined by Nick Merritt, VP of Products and Services at Halo Security. Halo Security helps organizations continuously discover and reduce their external attack surface, helping to give security teams an attacker's eye view of their digital footprint across cloud, third-party, and shadow assets. Nick brings a pragmatic, no-hype perspective on what security leaders may be underestimating now and why traditional approaches are struggling to keep pace with how fast digital exposure is expanding. So, Nick, it's great to see you. Great to have you with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary.
My pleasure.
I'm happy to, be here and kind of talk about EASM. It's one of those, topics that not everybody has on their radar. So it's good to kind of talk about what it is, what it's not, and things like that. So I'm happy to, answer any questions you have today, Gary, and see where we go.
Absolutely. So, Nick, I'll start kind of in a zoom out kind of question, right? From your vantage point, what you see day to day, how is the attack landscape? I know it's a macro question, but how has that shifted over the past year or two? And what do you think most security leaders are really underestimating about that right now?
Got it. Yes, actually, this particular EASM has gone through a little bit of an interesting, let's say, conversation from Gartner in the industry. It has been shifted into kind of getting renamed into something called EAP, so Exposure Assessment Platforms. A lot of what we're seeing here is that EASM is being thought of as too complex or having too much noise as a solution. So one of the things that I find about this is it's a little bit of a disservice to what EASM is supposed to accomplish for you. So when I do talk to people, I try to actually kind of paint the picture of what we're trying to accomplish here without over adding complexity to it. I guess the easiest way to kind of visualize what I mean is that we live in a world, especially in enterprise, of vulnerability scanners that are built for internal vulnerability scanning. 90% of all the thought process behind those solutions are to solve that problem, which is perfect. And then we have this layer that's of assets that are pointed out on the internet-facing assets. And they need a special approach to actually accommodate those. So EASM is actually perfect in my mind. And in fact, when we started building the solution, it wasn't really, we weren't trying to tie it to, one of the categories out there. We were actually just trying to solve a real world problem, which is you don't know what your external attack risk is when you're just using your traditional vulnerability scanners. So I know this is long worded, Gary. I tend to have a lot of passion about this subject. So I apologize for, continuing to speak right there. But what I really want people to understand is that we need to have EASM as the first layer of security to understand what you have out there so we can feed what we find into traditional vulnerability scanning, etc. So
it's a great answer, and it's it's an audio medium first, so it's good. The more we talk, the better off we are. Just as a quick follow-up to that, I guess, just for those that maybe not as kind of in the weeds day to day, right? Do you think it's a situation where like the attackers, the bad guys, are just moving faster, and we collectively are struggling to catch up? Is it maybe not full buy-in from different companies in terms of protection? Is it a combination thereof?
I think the core risk to all of this is that we're combining our external risk with our internal findings in most security programs. And so, for example, one of the arguments that Gartner had about EASM was too much noise. Well, what's funny about it is that combining your external with your internal means that you're taking all your internal findings and burying it in the noise of your internal findings. So this is why I really think it's important that there is isolation between what it looks like from an attacker's perspective versus what it looks like when you're an employee inside that company. And this is where gaps are overlooked. And I think this is why we're still in this world of being breached from external assets today, is because that mixture of vulnerability data is getting buried.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you mentioned the idea of gaps, which kind of leads me to my next question perfectly. I think there's a lot of companies out there that feel strongly that they have a good, strong, beefy security posture, right? Even within those organizations, and obviously those that certainly don't have that same strong security posture. Where are you seeing the most consistent gaps in organizations today?
Right. That is a good question, because I do, run into many security groups that think they have everything under control, I guess the easiest way to put it, which is great, right? You want to have a confident security program, but when it comes to, even if you have an EASM solution, for some reason, the industry treats it, uh, I would say treats it the wrong way. So, uh, the way ESM should really be used as like a teammate. It shouldn't be a challenge. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of times EASMs get put into a situation where go off and find what you can find and then let us know. But that's really not the right methodology or approach for EASM. What you want to do is provide the solution with as much DNS information, external assets as you know about. DNS, IP addresses into an EASM solution. That way we can go look for the gaps that you're not aware of, right? So removing the challenge from that mindset when you're using these solutions is important. And I run into that a lot. I said, if I'm going to do this myself, I'm going to feed everything I know into the program and then let it run its algorithms to try to find things I don't know about. So that's, one of the areas where I see the confusion there. Hey, EASM solution, just go out and find everything you can and let me know, instead of actually working together as a like a teammate.
Sure.
The other part to that is that the um, the advantage of having a solution that's more than just a piece of software is really important, because most IT people that I work with are very much in the internal mindset of how to do things. So whenever we meet with our customers, quarterly or monthly, whatever the cadence is, we are guiding them on things to pay attention to that are just not on their radar. So having a solution that is a mixture of software with a guided approach is really what I suggest for most companies, big or small.
Yeah, so it sounds, if I can maybe put it in a different context, sounds like it's almost like a mindset or a process issue for a lot of companies versus just a tooling issue. Like they might have the tools, but they're not perhaps not deploying them correctly. Is that a fair way to say it?
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. And I know I talk about that quite a bit, because I feel like, you have to break that into that thought process a lot, because you get internally how you do things is a little bit differently.
Sure. Sure. And I'm sure we're all kind of victims of our own processes that sometimes, whether they work or not, that's just the way we do things. Right. So just kind of getting that educational piece and kind of breaking through the mold there. But, you've touched on a couple of things, about kind of industry at large, but I want to talk specifically about Halo Security and what you guys do. Where would you say your approach, and I think you've alluded to it a little bit already, but where would you say your approach differs from how some companies have traditionally tried to solve this problem, and kind of how do you approach that on a day-to-day or whatever the cadence is with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I did touch on it a little bit, which is, separating your internal versus, external findings and risks. So you really understand what all the attackers in the world are seeing about you, right? So we focus on that and we don't try to cross over into a realm of mixing those. And it's very important because I see a lot of other companies kind of being led in that direction when I really say, no, just stick to being the external attack surface management company. Um, you know, the other thing about it is that traditional vulnerability scanners do not find a large portion of the risk that's only on the external attack surface. So you have subdomain takeovers, which people have heard of, and that's why you go to it. But there's many other risks as well. When you're running vulnerability scanning on externally, most of the time customers are only putting in their own infrastructure. And what I mean by that is that you'll have subdomains pointed at third-party software. And those are not scanned. There's no malware checks. There's no subdomain takeover checks. There's no keys being exposed in their web applications. It's just completely missed because it's not even on the IT person's thought process that I need to audit a third party's website because we've actually pointed a DNS record at it. And if you're not familiar with web application security and how the flaws work, you could easily dismiss it. It's not mine. If you hack a third party, how are you going to hack into my infrastructure? One of the easiest examples would be single sign-on sessions. So companies are implementing single sign-on. You could use Okta, one login with SAML, and those are all, session-based authentication that if you have a subdomain that's vulnerable, you can actually start siphoning off sessions. To make a long story short, I did a webinar on it in detail. We can, go through it. We can link to it. But the point that I'm saying here is that you're missing a whole list of vulnerabilities that traditional vulnerability scanners are not looking for. So, and they have no clue that they have this blind spot as well. So until I actually have a conversation with them.
What's that? You mentioned the blind spots. So like, what's the aha moment, right? For me, if you're walking me through and saying, "Hey, Gary, you've missed all of this over here." Like, what is it? What is it that really is the hook for me that makes me realize how vulnerable me and my company really are?
Well, the nice thing about this solution is we get those moments almost on every single POC, which is great. So we'll go back to first, it's actually infrastructure that they didn't know they have, right? They'll be looking through their assets and you'll see, hey, we have default Windows servers out there that probably been sitting out there for years. Hopefully they're not compromised. What are they doing out there? Who owns them? And then you have a situation where you've changed support portals. We've gone, from, Zendesk to Intercom or vice versa, and you didn't remove the DNS record. So now you are vulnerable to a subdomain takeover. Or we're looking through these subdomains that are on third parties, and they're just grossly misconfigured. Open ports, databases, API keys, malware, just obviously you do not want to be connected with this third party on your domain space, right? A subdomain of yours. So these are all, big question marks of what are we doing there? We've never even known we had that risk.
Right. Okay. So, and so I'm curious then, what is the right time for a company, like whether the right stage of company or the right timing for a company to add EASM? Is it, hey, we're rapidly growing, there's, acquisitions, you're expanding your vendor ecosystem. Like, what's the right time for a company to sit back and say, if we don't have it now, we really need to layer in EASM?
Right. I would say that the way most companies needed to implement this years ago, it was not on the radar for most people. And it really should have been. Not sure how we got to where we are today and just totally forgot about this layer. So at any time you realize you do not have an EASM solution, you need one. Doesn't matter if you're just a startup that just new this month. Actually, that's better because EASM solutions, they scale with you. So if you have a small attack surface, very, inexpensive to roll out, and then it'll scale with you from there. But it also keeps you in check right from the beginning. When I run into these large enterprise companies and then we do a discovery on them, they just go, wow, that's going to take forever to clean up. And in some ways, there's a lot of shortcuts to it as well. So that's part of why you want to have somebody that's also guiding you and not just providing you with all the data. Because you're going to say, yes, I know this looks noisy, but we can get through this very quickly together. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. I really can't say much more about that than if you're missing this layer, you need this layer. Uh, Earlier, better. Just like many things in life, the earlier you have a solution in place, the better off you're going to be in the long run. So,
Yeah, so I guess perhaps the way to think about it is that EASM should really be a foundational move for a company rather than, hey, we're maturing as an organization. Now it's time to, we should have done this from the beginning. A lot of companies are playing catch up. So rather than playing catch up, start, act today, essentially, right?
exactly. And I have companies that they're actually just starting to mature where they are paying attention to actually buying a vulnerability scanner or service and things like that. That's exact time you should actually be looking to do an inventory of what you have and what you look like first, and then figure out what solution would be best to go from there. So just to circle back to where Gartner wants to go with this topic, I agree with them in terms of the onion of security. But what I don't agree with in terms of saying that, we should skip over this layer and go to something more complex is that word right there, complexity, right? What is the barrier to entry for most companies that do nothing is they get distracted by the complexity and then they get it breached. So,
yep. And then I would imagine it's even more complex once you get breached rather than, they think it's complex now, wait till you get breached, right?
Of course. And I mean, a solution like Halo, you can deploy it in days. This is not a month. A lot of the solutions that were being pushed to, in the industry take a long time to years, actually, not exaggerating, to actually deploy, and then having people on staff that actually implement it correctly, right? So that is one of the complexities there with the industry. So you want to make sure that things make sense to you. I mean, at Halo, we don't have this as like a slogan or anything like this. It's more of a personal thing when I'm looking at the product. I like to keep everything kind of like in a KISS kind of state, keep it simple and stupid. I want customers to be able to come in and understand what they're looking at and make progress and then log out and get back to the rest of their life, basically.
Right. Perfect. No, that's a good motto to live by. I think on all fronts, certainly. So, what's a conversation that you would like to have more securities leaders have leading into RSA? I know there's this big AI. I don't want to call it a big boom, but there's a lot of AI hype. There's a lot of stuff happening in the industry. What's a focal point of conversation that you would hope to have people are having leading into and at the event?
Yeah, I mean, AI is fun and it's very useful, and I think we're gonna be living through a huge change in the way we do things. But if I'm going to RSA this month, I pretty much would want to look at what can I actually do today versus what I can do tomorrow. We should be looking at both. But I think a lot of times what we end up doing when we go to these programs is looking at things we're going to do tomorrow. If you don't have EASM, you can do that today, and you should. Right? It's a no-brainer.
So if obviously it sounds like it's really easy to implement, which is great. As you said, you can roll it out in days. If I do that, I'm a security leader. Like, what does my security strategy look like starting tomorrow? How does that change my mentality around my overall security posture, knowing that I now have this other layer that I didn't have yesterday?
Well, a lot of times I'm speaking to somebody that's in a leadership position at an enterprise company or just a C-level. What you will see is an attack surface that actually will tell you where your weaknesses are internally with your teams. So depending on how large the organization is, you might find the different regions are paying attention to things a little differently. So this is, without trying to be, rude or something like that. Most leaders, when they see an EASM solution, they go, "Woo, this group doesn't look like they're doing such a great job over here." Right? So it gives you this perspective that you usually don't get inside a company. As a leader, you're usually being provided with reports from your team, and you're not getting that outside perspective. So you're with the solution like ours, you're getting, the attacker's perspective, but you're also getting some very interesting, how well the teams are working together and how different they are in terms of infrastructure on the internet.
Yeah, and I would imagine that's a really interesting thing for a leader to see because, as someone who's not necessarily as tech focused, right, kind of getting the bigger picture is great, but also getting into the weeds, but in a very transparent, easy to understand way, that kind of digestible bits of information is really important, I would imagine. So
yeah, absolutely. And CISOs, it's very common. CISOs tend to be at companies for very short periods of time. And one of the things that I've helped a lot of CISOs with is getting an external view. So it basically energizes their whole program within the first 90 days that they're at a company. They'll be able to see, they'll have so much more information about what it really looks like as they're trying to do the reconnaissance on their situation. So
no, that's great. So Nick, as we wrap up the conversation today, can you just help let listeners and viewers know the best way to connect with you and learn more about Halo?
sure. I mean, of course, it's our website, halosecurity.com. You can even sign up for a trial directly on there, or you can just request to contact us. We'll meet you on a Zoom call, listen to the situation that you're in, and we'll find the best solution for you. Halo Security, we let you know what we're good at, and then we'll also let you know where to go if we think that we're not the right solution. So it's very easy to work with.
So really that trusted advisor in the security space, which I think everyone needs, certainly. And Nick, will you guys be out at RSA?
We will. We will. I don't think we have a booth. I won't be out there personally, but we will be out there meeting with our customers. So
awesome. Well, hopefully everyone listening, if interested, can connect with you guys ahead of time, and certainly if not ahead of time at the show. But Nick, thanks again so much for the conversation. Really appreciate your insights, your perspective, and obviously sharing the great information about what you guys are doing at Halo. This is exactly what Stand Out Before RSA is all about. It's really about positioning leaders and companies that are approaching the market thoughtfully, kind of cutting through the noise as we head into RSA, which we know it can be incredibly noisy out there. So if you found this conversation valuable, please be sure to connect with Nick and Halo Security and follow their work, and stay tuned for more episodes in this series as we continue the countdown to RSA this month. Thanks so much for listening.